Good morning and welcome back to Morning Coffee with Doug. And I have a small topic on my mind this morning, a very small one, and it's more of a current event than anything else. And I don't have all kinds of amazing facts and figures about this topic. In fact, I don't really know anything about it. So this topic for Morning Coffee with Doug is more like me just thinking aloud about something that I came across on social media, and I think all of us came across it. I mean, it was a big deal all across YouTube and news programs all around the world. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the robot performance at the big Chinese New Year festival that took place in China. I'm pretty sure we all saw the news stories. We all saw clips of the news stories anyway. And if you haven't, well, go look, because it is absolutely mind-blowing, especially when you compare it to just 1 year ago. Like, go back 1 year and look at video clips of robots. Of course, companies all over the world are developing their own type of robots. The United States, everybody knows about the famous robots from Boston Dynamics. Atlas is the humanoid robot, Spot the dog. I'm fascinated by those video clips. I think we all are. Anytime it shows up on YouTube, I watch all of them just to see how far robotics is developing. And then, of course, China has lots of companies developing robots. And if you go back, like I said, 1 or 2 years, and you see these robots in action, and you're amazed at what they can do and how they're improving. But this year, 2026, when China put on this performance, it was a massive, it seemed like a massive leap forward. You're watching these robots doing kung fu, doing backflips, doing all kinds of crazy acrobatics, like 10 of them in perfect synchronized motion, doing things that the average human can only dream about doing. You know, it feels like 1 year ago, robots were trying to go upstairs and were falling over, and we're thinking, you know, I can go upstairs. But now we're seeing robots doing massive flips through the air. And then if you're watching carefully, of course, you'll see that even when they land, like 10 of them on the stage, and 1 or 2 of them might land a little bit awkwardly, a little bit off balance, and then it adjusts its footing, just like a human would. Like you do a somersault or something and you land on your feet and you're not quite balanced, and then you just kind of move your feet a little bit to regain your balance and then go on with the routine. And we saw these robots doing that. And of course, when you see this happening, your mind is blown, because I don't think we've seen anything quite like that anywhere in the world before. This was really, it felt like something very new. And I think most people would react to it by thinking, wow, robots have made an evolutionary step forward. Look how intelligent they are. Look at all the incredible things they can do. But, and this is where my thinking started, just sort of off the top of my head, just thinking out loud, I watched the full performance from Chinese New Year, the robots performing, and watched it over and over and over again, and that got me thinking. One thing I noticed, of course, is that they were performing with children. So like when I first saw them, just the robots, I mean, just because of the sense of scale, I just assumed they were adult-sized, like that they were like 6 foot tall robots doing these amazing twists and turns and acrobatics. But then they started performing with humans, and to be honest, at the very beginning, I just sort of assumed they were adults that the robots were dancing with and then doing martial arts techniques with nunchucks and staffs, and they're fighting with these other humans. But then I realized all of the human performers were children. So they're all like, I don't even know what the heights are. I'd like to know. Like, I have no idea how tall these robots were. But my initial reaction was, oh, they're 5.5 to 6 feet tall. And then I realized, no, they're actually much shorter than that. They're children-sized. And that kind of made sense to me because of the physics of it. I mean, it seemed like such a major leap forward. And of course, you're comparing it in your mind to other robots you've seen. And I've seen robots like Atlas get much, much better in terms of running and jumping and doing things like that. But Atlas is not doing these flips through the air and doing martial arts. And I'm like, wow. But one thing you have to take into account is that these are much smaller robots. And that helps a lot in terms of what they're capable of doing. It reduces, the movement of all the limbs, the inertia and the momentum, all these things that have to be dialed in, and you get it just right. So it's a lot easier at small scale than big scale. And most of the news coverage that I saw never really brought that up. Like, they weren't like technical analysis of what is going on. So that kind of jumped out at me. And then, of course, as I'm watching it, you see how synchronized the robots are, and that looks incredibly impressive. But then the more you think about it, the more you realize what that means. And they're so perfectly synchronized because they aren't actually thinking, right? The robots don't know how to fight with a staff. They don't really know how to do a backflip, right? It's not at the level of intelligence. It's at the level of programming, where computers have dialed in an exact sequence of commands for exactly how to move this limb, this limb, this limb. It's a sequence of precise movements that are set into a computer program, and then the robot executes those movements. You see what I mean? So even though it is an incredible display of dexterity and mobility, it isn't really a display of intelligence. So I guess what I'm getting at here, just at a very basic level, is you did see a lot of social media commentary about how these robots are, centuries ahead in terms of technology than something like Atlas. Because you can put some video of Atlas from Boston Dynamics, and you'll see video of Atlas trying to do something, and then it's moving very slowly and clunky and making mistakes. And then you cut to these robots in China doing backflips and doing martial arts and fighting with these children and doing all these amazing things. And you think, oh my goodness, how much more advanced they are. But what you're looking at are two entirely different tasks. So the robots doing the acrobatics, they're following a program. It's very similar in a way to robots we've seen on assembly lines, where robots are putting together cars, and each robot is programmed to execute a precise series of movements. Pick this up, move it to this spot, weld here, weld here, weld here. But the robot doesn't know that it's welding a piece of a car. It has no awareness of its environment or what it's doing. If you took that robot out of the assembly line and put it here in my hotel room, it would just keep doing this, right? Even though it's not building a car, it's not doing anything, you plug it in and turn it on, it would just start moving, like as if it's picking something up, putting it here, welding it. Like, it doesn't even know that it's not picking up anything, it's not welding anything. It is a pre-programmed set of movements that it just mimics. And these acrobatic robots are doing the same thing. But of course, the next level of robotics would be something like what I was talking about with Atlas, where you take Atlas and put it into an unfamiliar environment, like just put it into somebody's house in their kitchen, and then you say to Atlas, oh, could you get me a glass of milk from the fridge? So now Atlas has to execute more of a intelligence-driven action, where it has to look around. Oh, I'm in a kitchen. Where's the fridge? Oh, there's the fridge. Walk to the fridge. How do I open the door? Open the door. Recognize where the milk is. And then it gets the milk in a glass and pours it, puts the milk away, and then brings you the glass of milk. That action would be many, many, many layers of magnitude greater than programming a robot to do a backflip, right? So that's kind of what I started thinking about ultimately. And then these robots in China, I really started to wonder how they did the programming. I mean, I'd love to know. And I couldn't find any information, like specific videos diving into the behind the scenes technology. I just found little hints about it. And what they talked about is that it was probably done by motion capture. And that made a lot of sense to me, where they took a human acrobat, a human being that can do all these backflips, all of these martial arts moves, and they put all the little bubbles on them, like for motion capture, for movies, all the little balls, and they're all wired, and then that human would do the backflip, and they use motion capture technology to capture that movement. And then they took that information, turned it into a computer program, and then fed it into the robot. And then the robot is imitating all of that movement that the human did. So my guess is that they used motion capture to do it. But again, I don't know for sure. I haven't found like a documentary that goes behind the scenes and shows exactly what the technology was. But yeah, I mean, overall, when I saw that performance, just mind blown. I mean, absolutely. I think we all had the same reaction. It was so interesting. And I started thinking about how much rehearsal had to go into that performance, because there are definitely safety concerns, right? There were moments where the children were in physical contact with the robots. You know, they were doing these martial arts moves with staffs, you know, fighting the kids, and almost like sword play, where the robot swings and then the child swings and blocks the blow, and they would actually be right in front of each other, and they're blocking the blows with their arms, you know, like kung fu, like you know, blocking the blow. And that can be very, very dangerous, because as I said, the robot, it doesn't know what it's doing. There's no intelligence there. It is just going through a sequence of moves, exactly like a much more sophisticated version, much faster version, but similar to a robot on an assembly line. So if you take the assembly line robot off the assembly line and just put it here, it's just going to keep doing those movements. And it's not going to care if your head is in the way. It's just going to clunk you in the head, because it's not thinking about what it's doing. And these robots doing the acrobatics and the martial arts would have been exactly the same. They're just going through a pre-programmed series of movements, and they don't know that there's a young child in front of it. And then I was thinking that if the child made a mistake, I mean, the robots are not going to make a mistake. They're kind of perfect, but they're interacting with human performers, and something could go wrong. Maybe something on the stage, because there were so many platforms rising and falling and moving. It was such an incredible performance. It was mesmerizing. But something could go wrong with one of those stage movements. One of the children maybe could lose their balance, bump into the robot, move it out of position, knock it over. But then the robot is just going to continue doing what it was programmed to do, but now it's out of place, it's out of position, and it could start whacking the kids in the head, whacking other robots. I mean, I'm sure there were safety protocols in there, I don't know what they would be or how they would work, but I think on a basic level, the performance only worked because they rehearsed it endlessly. And I can only imagine how unbelievably trained the children were, how many times they practiced this routine so that they were always in the exact right spot, so that they were right in front of the robot, and the child, was going through the motions and being in the right spot and not making a mistake. Again, I would love to know what the number was, right? How many times was this rehearsed, and how many months, years? I don't know how much work went into putting this performance together. I mean, on stage, it looked effortless, it looked beautiful, and it looked effortless. It was really astonishing. But what I'm interested in more than that, once you start thinking about it, is the technology involved and the precision involved, and how did the preparation go, what that was like. And maybe just to drive home my off the top of my head thoughts, I noticed a lot of comments on social media, like sort of just playing around with this science fiction fantasy idea, kind of Terminator ideas. We're looking at these robots on stage and the unbelievable physical abilities they had, far greater than human beings. And they're like kind of like prototypes almost, and they can already do this. And people were saying things like, whoa, can you imagine what the armies of the future are going to look like? We can take these robots, send them into battle, and they just go running at the soldiers on the other side, attacking them using guns. But of course, based on everything that I've been thinking about and talking about, that is not realistic. Because even though it looks like they know how to do martial arts, they don't. They're just performing a pre-programmed set of movements. So if you took those 10 robots, or took one of them and brought it into a gym where human beings are learning martial arts, they're practicing fighting, whatever their technique is, karate or taekwondo or MMA, and then you put that robot on the mat, and you think the robot is going to be able to fight the humans. Well, you're not thinking properly, because that robot, all it can do is what it was programmed to do on that stage. So you put it in the middle of the mixed martial arts gym, push the button to turn it on, it's just going to start doing backflips, and it's going to go through the motions it was programmed to do. And if a human was going to fight it, they would just kind of, just walk around it. Like, you just stay out of the way, and the robot isn't going to like come after you and try to hit you, because there's no intelligence there. And then you, as a human, you can just sort of walk around it at a safe distance and let it do its backflips or whatever, and then you just take a baseball bat and whack it on the head, and that's it for the robot. So these robots look like they're amazing fighting machines. They're not there yet. Obviously, now they have the dexterity, the physical ability to move in very impressive ways. But that's very different from telling it to go into a battlefield and attack the enemy, or even go into your home and do the laundry, get you a cold beer from the fridge. None of these robots would be able to do anything like that, which, I find really quite interesting. As I was like roaming around YouTube and watching all of these videos about robotics, another topic that kind of came through was related to the physical design of these robots. The fact that most companies are trying to develop humanoid robots. At least those are all the main robots that we see on YouTube videos. And I find that kind of interesting, because we just think, oh yeah, of course, robots, humanoid. Makes sense. But does it really make sense? Because in a way it makes sense, because we as humans have developed a world, a physical world around us that matches with our body shape and how we move around. So this hotel room over time, or even this building, has evolved to match what I can do with my body. The bathroom, the taps, the stairs, it matches the human body. So if you want a robot to move around this environment, you think, humanoid is the way to go. And it makes sense. It is logical. But you do wonder how far you can go with that. And I was watching a video, I think it was about Atlas, again, from Boston Dynamics. And it's a humanoid robot, but only in its basic shape. When you started watching it going about the tasks that they gave it, you realize that it is also profoundly different from a humanoid shape. And the way it would move was really, really freaky, because we as humans, we have a front side and a back side. And if I'm walking in this direction and I want to go in the other direction, my whole body has to turn around, right? And we're used to that idea that we're walking in this direction and then we turn around and then we go back in that direction. You watch Atlas, because its limbs and all of its joints go in 360 degrees. Every joint spins and moves in any direction. So the robot just goes this way and then it goes this way. The body itself doesn't have to turn around. Only little bits and pieces of it does. So it's going this way with its arms in front of it, and then it just stops, and now the arms go to the back. Maybe the head turns around. Maybe there's a waist and the chest turns around. And it's like the body just goes this way and then it just goes this way. And the limbs go from front to back, but the body itself doesn't even move. And then when you watch that, it's really kind of creepy. It's like, oh, that is so weird. The way it moves, it almost has like a spider-like quality, an insect-like. When you see it standing still, you think, oh, look, there's a friendly robot. And then as soon as it starts moving, suddenly it looks alien. It's like, yee, that is so weird. Like, don't move like that. You're freaking me out. So I thought of that. And then I came across some other YouTube videos where they were discussing design. And there was one company that made a big point about, like, do we really need robots that look like people? Because they look kind of scary in a way. Like, we don't need to give them a human face, because we get into that whole uncanny valley idea where humans, our eyes and our brains, are really powerful when it comes to pattern recognition. And if the robot designed to look like an actual human is a little bit off, we see it. And it kind of freaks us out. It's like, oh, there's that uncanny valley feeling. It's like, oh, that looks weird. It's trying to look like a human. It's trying to reassure you by looking like another person. But then it has the opposite effect. And it comes across like almost like a scary monster, because it's just a little bit unnatural and it just freaks us out. So this company was saying, well, why even try to make it look human? And it created a robot that clearly looked non-human. It had robotic abilities with arms and grippers and things, but it just had a big square as a head, like a long rectangle, and with like a goofy cartoon smile and goofy cartoon eyes. So it looked non-human, but it looked really, really friendly. It looked like something non-threatening, because they deliberately chose to make it look that way. It looks like a friendly toy, almost like a robotic pet in a way, right? And that is a very interesting way to think about robots, where you do get to the point where if you're following your instinct, hey, let's make our robot look more and more human, You think that's a good thing to do, and maybe it could be, but I think there's room for this idea that, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do that. Let's make our robots look like robots. Make them look friendly, non-human, kind of goofy, and maybe we would feel more comfortable living with them. Like, I mean, imagine if I had my own personal robot butler and it looked like a person and it's just standing over there in the corner looking at me while I'm recording this video. It would freak me out because I would naturally start to think of it like there's another person in my room, and I would feel kind of guilty giving it orders, right? It's a machine. That's what it's designed to do, but it looks so human. I would probably be reluctant to say, you know, hey, you know, robot buddy, could you make me another cup of coffee? I even have that feeling about AI. Like if I ask an AI to make a cartoon to put in one of my videos and the cartoon isn't right, I feel reluctant to ask it to do it again. Because like if it's a human being, like an artist, then I say to the artist, oh, listen, can you make a cartoon showing this, and the human works for 2 hours, comes to my office and says, oh, hey boss, here's my cartoon. And I look at it and go, oh, that's awful. Do it again. And then they come back and their new version, here, oh, that's even worse. Do it again. I would feel guilty telling a human to do the job over and over until they get it right. And I transfer that feeling to AI. So even if I ask Nano Banana, can you make this image? And I usually want to use the first one because I don't want to say, oh, no, you made a mistake. Can you fix this? And then it does it again. And it's like, no, that's not quite right. Can you, like, I feel guilty giving an AI an order again and again and again. Sometimes I've asked one of my AI buddies a question related to some fact in science or history. And I remember asking the question 2 months ago, but I forgot the answer. So like right now I'm trying to think, what was the answer to that question? What year did this explorer go to India or something, some point in history? And I'm reluctant to ask the AI again, like ask the same question. It's like if you have a human friend and yesterday you asked your friend, hey, what is your email address? And they tell you, but now today you forgot. And then you send your friend another message or you call them and say, oh, yeah, what is your email address? And your friend, I just told you yesterday. You already forgot? Quit bothering me with all of your questions. And that's a human thing. But the AI is not a human and it doesn't care. So even though I asked it this question 2 months ago, I can ask it again. I could ask that question 100 times today, and the AI is never going to complain because it's not a human. It's just a computer program. And yet, even though I know that, I'm reluctant to ask the AI the question a second time. I'll do a search, like I go into my AI search history, and then I'll type in some keywords about that question just so I can look up the answer. And that's a lot slower and less efficient. But I do that because I feel guilty that I'm making the AI answer the same question, even though I just asked it, 2 months ago. So when it comes to robotics, like I said, if I have my own robot butler and it looks like a human being over there, I would feel reluctant to give it orders. I would naturally treat it like a human being. But if it's like a goofy looking cartoon thing over there, if it looks like a machine, I wouldn't have the same issues, right? Like if I ask it, oh, could you make me a cup of coffee? And then it makes the cup of coffee, but somehow I couldn't drink it because I did something else and it got cold. So like 10 minutes later, I say to the robot, oh, could you make me a cup of coffee? A human would say, I just made you a cup of coffee. Why do you? Well, yeah, because it got cold and I want a hot one. And but And if I see a humanoid robot, I would be reluctant to ask for a second cup of coffee. I would drink the cold one. But if it's a goofy looking robot with a cartoon face, I'll ask it for 100 cups of coffee. Like, I'm not worried about hurting its feelings because it doesn't look humanoid anymore. And I mean, you can think of that. You know, I've got a little speaker here, and I can treat this speaker any way I want, and I don't feel bad about it. Like right now, maybe I think, oh, I want to listen to a podcast, so I turn it on. I made it power up. I made it connect to my phone. And then I realized, oh, I'm recording a video. I can't listen to a podcast right now. And then I turn it off. Power it down. And then I can toss it over there onto the bed. Like, I'm not worried about it hurting its feelings. I can turn it on again, turn it off, turn it on, turn it. I can do that all day long. And I'm not going to worry about it because, yeah, it's a machine. It's an object. I'm not worried about its feelings because it doesn't have any. But if you start making robots that look like exact duplicates of people, you know, we'll interact with them in a way where we're worried about their feelings. And that's kind of strange when you think about it. And that can be an argument for making our helper robots. Because in the future, we're going to have them. I mean, that's pretty obvious. A lot of, in my case, you know, I may not live long enough to see them, but clearly we are going to have helper robots in our homes. I mean, we already have them to a certain extent, but we're going to have more mobile humanoid robots. You can go out and buy them right now. They have limited functionality, but they already exist, and they're just going to get better and better and better. So in the future, yeah, they're going to be very, very common. So it is something we can think about now. It's like, do you want that robot helper to look like a human being, or do you want it to look like this, so that you don't have this weird emotional connection to it? You know what I mean? Yeah, robotics, very very fascinating topic. And when I saw that performance for Chinese New Year, you know, it sparked a lot of thoughts. And in fact, yesterday, I was on a YouTube channel called Dust. It's something I've stumbled across recently. I love movies, I love TV shows, and there are more and more and more really good, like, shorts and full movies on YouTube. So you can just basically watch them for free. They're all posted to YouTube. And there is a newish sci-fi YouTube channel called Dust, and I've been on Dust a lot lately. They post some really, really amazing programs, like science fiction movies that are anywhere from 5 minutes long, like a short, to 20 minutes long, things like that. And I remember, I just thought of it just now. I watched one yesterday that goes into this topic a little bit. It was the story of an elderly couple living in a remote house on a cliff in a very kind of remote, rough area. And they're quite elderly. The man in particular had mobility issues. And then the woman fell. She had to be hospitalized. And then the man was living alone. And then one of his children paid for him to have a robot helper in the home. So it was a robot, a caregiver, basically. And it's not a full-on movie, so everything isn't fully developed. It's like 20 minutes long, but it's very, very good, very entertaining, very interesting. But it followed the pattern of a lot of these sorts of stories where this android, this helper robot, started to become a threat, where it was holding the man prisoner. It was like one of these robotic directives going out of control. Like, one of its directives is keep this man safe, right? That's part of its programming. But if you take that idea too far, well, you don't let the man leave the house. You don't let the man go out into the garden to prune the roses with clippers, because the rose thorns can prick his hands. He could cut himself with the clippers. So the robot started taking over his entire life. Wouldn't let him leave the room, wouldn't let him leave the house, wouldn't let him have any of his hobbies. Anything that posed a danger to him, the robot prevented him, and eventually, just stood in front of the door and said, no, you can't go outside. It's too dangerous out there, right? It was the show was more intelligent than that, because it wasn't just the robot going rogue. It wasn't a simplistic story. What had happened was the man, he didn't want to bother his daughter, right? Like, the robot was programmed that if he injured himself, the robot was supposed to inform the daughter. And he did cut himself with the clippers when he was out in the rose bushes, and then the robot was bandaging his palm, and then the robot said something about, I will submit a report to your daughter about this. And then the man said, no, 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 no. Do you have to do that? Like, we don't make her worried. A very human thing, right? You injure yourself, you don't want to worry other people, you don't mention it. So the man said to the robot, he's like, no, 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 I don't want you to do that. And then the robot said, oh, so you don't want me to run anything by the daughter anymore. You don't want me to communicate with the daughter. And the man, not really understanding how big an order this was, he said, well, yeah, so don't tell my daughter. But then the robot internalized this command in such a way that it could not submit care reports to the daughter and get permission from her to do certain things, not do other things. And then the robot had to think for itself, and then it went rogue and just started making rules up. Like, no, you can't leave this room, you can't go outside, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the man became a prisoner of the robot. And then eventually the whole thing was solved, because the man really injured himself, and then he told the robot, please tell my daughter that I need help. And then the robot said, oh, so you want to countermand the order about never communicating with your daughter? And then the man said, well, yeah. And then, okay. And then everything cleared up. You see what I mean? So it wasn't like the robot was evil. It was just like this weird mix-up in the command structure in the programming. And the thing about this robot, because it's a low-budget movie, they couldn't make it look like, Robbie the robot. So it was basically an actress. It was an actress, a woman, playing the role of the robot, and they made her eyes look blue. So that's a lot cheaper, right? So if you have to have a robot in your story, it's a lot cheaper to make the robot look like a perfect humanoid, because then you just get one of your friend actors. It's like, hey, do you want to be in my movie? Yeah, okay, you can pretend to be a robot. That's a lot cheaper than using, CGI to create a graphic image of a robot, or build a robot that actually moves around and looks like a robot. You just use an actor to pretend to be a robot, and that's the easiest thing. So I'm basically, what I'm saying is, in a lot of sci-fi, we see robots that look perfectly humanoid, and part of the reason for that is, it's a lot cheaper. You just hire an actor to walk around and pretend to be a robot. That's cheaper than building an actual robot. But in the future, we don't have to go that route. We can just make the robot look like a robot, look like a machine, a friendly, goofy cartoon machine, and then we won't have trouble giving it orders and interacting with it. We won't feel guilty. Like, I've had my robot butler, I would just say, hey buddy, go clean the bathroom. I would just give it orders all day long: clean the bathroom, vacuum the floor. Oh, can you do this, do that? Oh, could you make lunch for me? I would just give it orders all day long, because it is a machine. But if it looks like a human, I'd probably try to make lunch for the robot, because I would feel guilty. He's like, hey, are you hungry? You want? And he said, no, I don't eat, sir. Like, oh yeah, I keep forgetting. I would do all of my work myself, because I would feel bad giving the robot orders. So anyway, robotics and off the top of my head thoughts, all stemming from those amazing robots from the Chinese New Year celebration. And as I said, I assume everybody has seen it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It was really astonishing. And I didn't see it right around like when the performance took place. I guess I was offline or something, and it wasn't until a few days later that it popped up in my YouTube feed, and I was like, wow. I wasn't aware of the story until quite recently, which is right now, the first week of Chinese New Year is ending. Like the big holiday period is ending right now, so we're all quite a few days into Chinese New Year, but I just became aware of this celebration in China with the robots. I just became aware of it, which is why I'm talking about it today. So that's it. Morning Coffee with Doug, talking about robots, and I'll see you in the next video.